In the patterns of distribution, we will be discussing about the topographical limit and endemism. The topographical limits are the limits which are keeping the organisms in particular area, and endemism means that there are some organisms which are specific to particular area, and those organisms are called endemic to that area. So organisms are confined to a specific range by topographical factors. Wherever the word topography comes, that means topo, that means the place or the space, and graphic, to study, to measure, to write. So these are the topographical factors which are related to the space, and such as the expanses of ocean and areas of lowland forest between the mountain ranges. So these are the different areas which limit the distribution of organisms and their pattern of distribution. And when there is such isolation, this may lead to the evolution of new forms and even new species. When a similar type of organism of one species are at one place, they will be, similar. But when there is some their patterns of distribution are differing due to the presence of a specific topographical factors in between those species, right? So there is one species and there is a mountain range between the two group of that species. So each group will evolve differently because they will have different selection pressure, and this will lead to the evolution of new forms and even new species of those organisms. So what is endemism? A species may evolve in one region, spread to other location, and then become extinct in all but a restricted area where it survives. So if we see a species, that species was not there a long time ago. It came from somewhere, and that species was distributed all over the areas, but it went extinct in most of the areas. There are still particular areas where that species still survives, and that species is endemic to that area. So species restricted in this way are said to be endemic to that area. An example of such endemism is the kangaroos or numerous species in the Australia. We will be discussing more about it. So endemism in general, there are two major factors which influence the degree of endemism in an area. The first one is the isolation and the second one is the stability. So isolation, if there is one island or some geographical area which is very much isolated from the rest of the continents, then there will be some evolution of species which are, evolving on their own, and they do not, related to any of the mainland species. And then there is the factor of stability. So isolated islands and mountains are often rich in endemics. So if you want to see some endemic species, you will see that they are found either on the islands and or in the mountainous areas, where mountains are the topographical factors which do not let the spread of the organisms, and they are affecting the patterns of distribution of those organisms. So one example of such endemism is Australia. The island of Australia, of course, we call the Australia as the continent, but essentially it is an island because it is not attached to any other continent. For example, has long been isolated from outside influences until the arrival of European people with their associated invasive organisms. So Australia has been having the endemic organism for a long time, and it was relatively undisturbed, and there were some indigenous human beings there which are called aboriginal people. or there were not so much people coming from the outside other continents until the European people came and they brought some of the invasive species with them, and that changed their endemicity as well. So those invasive organisms can change the ecosystems of the Australia. Although not particularly stable in its climate, Australia covers a very considerable area. So on a simple area basis, it should be expected to have an extensive range of endemic. So it is very large continent and it contains a lot of endemic species. Although its weather or climate is not very stable, but still it is containing range of endemics. So Australia also contains few physical barriers to movement during the time of change. So extinction by local isolation has not been an important factor. There is Australian outback, that is the huge desert in the mid of the Australia, and this is the geographical factor which is responsible for the controlling the endemics, and it cannot lead to their extinction. Australia is indeed rich in endemics, and many of which have a long geological history. This kind of fossil endemism is called Paleoendemism. If you want to see the ancient organism, how they evolved in a particular area, that is called Paleoendemism. In contrast to the new Neo-endemism, that means that you bring some species to an area which were not endemic to there, but once you got those species there, in the rest of the world, those species went extinct, but they are found only there. Now, these species are called neo-endemic to that area.